Welcome back to another animation video. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, make sure to check them down in the description box down below. There's some very basic information, theory about animations, what you need, how the characters should be set up, well, somewhat, at least the theory stuff of it, and the basic knowledge that you should have before running these things. And also in the previous episode, we talked about the animation states and their replication, so that might be interesting as well. Today, we're going to be talking about how to set up the basic blend spaces so that our character can actually run around, walk around, and well, basically we are going to recreate what the Unreal Engine skeletal already has and the mannequin already has by default. And that is, well, we need to make sure that our character can blend between idling, walking, and running, and also jumping states. So first, let's talk about the idle walk run. So for that, we need a blend space, which will allow us to blend between these animations. So I'm going to right click in the content browser, go to the animations, and create myself a new blend space. And make sure to base this off of your skeletal. I'm using this fit male 1 skeletal, and I'm going to call this male blend space. There we go. Let's open this one up. And on the left side, you might have the skeletal tree open. Go ahead, open your asset details. If they're not there, they should be under the window and asset details. Enable this and it should pop up somewhere on the screen. So we have our horizontal axis and we have our vertical axis. For the horizontal axis, we're going to leave these be. We're going to talk about these later because this is for the directional movement, and we're going to cover that in the upcoming episodes as well. But for today, we're going to talk about the vertical axis. So this line right here, the middle piece that we have with this green square. So let's name this our speed because this does represent the speed of our character. Now the minimum value needs to be 0, that is our idle state, and the maximum value, well, by default in Unreal Engine it is 600, and I'm going to be using that value for this video. Now the first thing that we need is our breathing idle, well, mine, for me at least, it's breathing idle animation. So your idle animation goes at the middle right here at the very bottom. And as soon as we drag it in, you can see our character is idling. Now if you bring in the wrong animation or put it in the wrong position, you can always select it, move it around, and once it's orange, you can hit the delete key and it's going to go away. So I'm going to bring this back in, and there we go. So the next one is our running and walking animation. So I'm going to grab my walking animation and bring it to 150, and that is a pretty good speed for me, for my animation. Now if your animation does not really match up, maybe you want it to be ran at a different speed value, but as you can see, it is snapping to these. You only have 150 and then instantly 350. Maybe you want to have it at 200 or 250. You can always go ahead and adjust the grid size. So in our case, it is 4. You can bump this up to like 5, 8, 8, or whatever you can. I think you can go like 100 as well. Okay, so go ahead and adjust those values for your liking. Another option is to changing the speed of the animation itself. So you can always double click your animation and change the rate scale. And that is the speed of the animation. So 0.5 is going to be half speed, 2 is going to be double the speed of the animation. So that might come in very handy. Always, you can also go -1 and it's going to reverse the animation, by the way. So that's a handy thing to have. Okay, so that's good. Let's go back to our blend space. Let's provide our running animation and let's try to make this functioning. So if we move our green square right here, you will see how it blends between the states based on the character's speed, as you can see. So we are all good with our blend space. We can go ahead and close it. We're not going to touch it at least in this video. Let's go now to our animation blueprint, and you will see that if you watch the previous videos, I have removed pretty much everything from this. All I have is my default state, and that's all that I have over here. So what I'm going to do is actually I cast to my character, and then I'm going to go ahead and promote my character to a variable so that it is a little bit easier to access this. So I'm going to call this player. And there is one more thing that I'm actually going to do is I'm going to grab my player. I'm going to get it, and I'm going to right click this, and I'm going to select convert to validated get, and I'm going to plug this in. Now what this essentially does is this is like an is valid node. It checks whether the player variable is valid, so whether it is set already. Now if it's not set, we want to go ahead and cast to the character and we want to set it. like so. Now, if it is valid, we are all good. I'm going to add a reroute and I'm going to go directly past it. And also after if it's not valid and we set it, we also want to proceed with this one, because then our player's reference is already valid and we can go ahead and proceed with the task. Now, now we need to make sure our blend space actually works, and it requires us to have a speed value. And to get the speed value, we can get our player. From our player, we can get its velocity. And from the velocity, we can go ahead and do the vector length. So what this essentially does is velocity returns us the movement in X, Y, Z axis, positive or negative, and how quick it is. And then this vector length basically converts that into a single number, which is a speed value, which we can then promote to a variable and call this speed. Let's plug that in to our execution route, and now this is going to grab us our speed. We're going to come back to this in a second because we're going to need to get some more stuff for our jumping, but first let's get our blend space functioning. So let's go to our state machine. So we have our state machine. Inside of here we have one default state. We're going to open that and we're going to delete our idle animation from the previous video and bring in our blend space instead. Let's plug that in and let's provide this some speed. Once we compile and save this, we can go inside of our game, hit play, and we can see how our character is now running. Now, to test some more stuff, let's go ahead, let's make sure that we can actually walk as well, so that we can reduce our speed. So you can always go to your character movement and reduce your max walk speed over here. I'm going to leave it be. Instead, I'm going to have a left shift key event on which I'm going to grab my character movement and I'm going to set the max walk speed. So on pressed, and also we're going to change it on released as well, so that while we hold it, when we have it holding, when we're pressing this, it's going to be 150, and whenever we release it, we go back to 600. Also, make sure to always connect the target as well for the bottom one, and we should be good to go. So now we should be able to hit play. So we are running, and when we hold shift, we now are walking. Okay, so our running and walking seems to be just fine. Now let's go ahead and let's make sure that we can actually jump, because at this point, well, if we jump, he starts walking because he has some velocity, he has some speed, so he is walking around. So we need to make sure and figure out whether our character is actually jumping or not. And to do so, let's go back to our event graph, and from our player, let's go ahead and let's check is falling. And this is going to return us the character movement and is falling node, which will tell us whether the character is falling. And then we can go ahead and promote this to a variable and call this is falling. And this is going to allow us to help figure out when we need to play our jumping animation. So let's go back to our state machine. And from here, well, now we need to set up a couple of states. So we're going to drag from this, we're going to add a state, and I'm going to call this jump up. And we are going to need a couple of animations. So you're going to see that in a second, because we will need initiating the jump, during the jump, and then after we have when we are landing, essentially. So we will need 3 animations. So if you have one which has all 3 of those things, then you will need to copy and paste it 3 times and chop it into pieces, and that's actually what I did with this one. So we need another one, another state from the jumping up. Then we need to go into our jump loop, which is whenever we are in the air, and then we need another one, which is the jump down, which is when we actually land, and then from there we can go back to our default state. Now at this point, now we need to provide all of these conditions right here, but before we do that, let's go ahead and let's put in the animations. So I'm going to double click jump up, and let's have a look where I have mine, which are, I have my jump up, which is this one right here. So you can see this is what it looks like. So he's jumping up, then we have the jumping loop like this one, and then we have jumping down, this one. Okay, so back in the state machine, jump loop, back in the state machine, jump down. There we go. So gave me a lot of errors. Obviously, we don't have any conditions to transfer between these animations. So the first one is this one, our default. So from default to jump up, and this is our is falling. So we want to get that, and if we are falling, we want to go ahead and transfer to that animation. Now, so we're going to be jumping. It's going to transfer us to our jump up. Now we need to go inside of our jump loop while we are still in the air. Now over here, what we are going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to do time remaining ratio on jump up. So this, as you can see, it says get the time as a fraction of the asset length of an animation in the asset player node. So this is basically how long have you been in that state inside of our jump up. So obviously we want to make sure that it finishes running. So we're going to go ahead and check if this is smaller than 1. And then we're going to go ahead and plug this in. So this basically will allow us to play the animation for a little bit and then go into the next state. So let's have the next state. So we have our jump loop, and the next state is checking if we are no longer falling. So we're going to get our is falling, and we're going to do a not value on this one, because we always need to return a positive value. It always has to be true over here because it can enter the transition. So it has to be true. If it's false, it can't. So we're going to flip our is falling. So whenever our character is no longer falling, it's going to say, yeah, it's true. You can go ahead and proceed with the next whatever it is that you want to do. And then the last final one is from jump down, going back to our default state. And over here again, we want to do the same thing we did when we went to the loop. We want to get our time remaining ratio for the jump down animation, so that we can then check again if it's smaller than 1, and if it is, we can go back to our default idle state once the animation has been playing for a little while. So with this being added, let's give it a try. So now whenever we jump, there we go, you can see my character is jumping. Now I don't have the best animations, as you can see, obviously, but if you have some proper animations, this is going to look a lot better. Mine is very stiff and it has like this aiming animation added to it, but other than that, looks to be all right. I'm going to leave it be for now, because later on we're going to have a lot of different blending possibilities. So we're going to have like the idle default hand position, which is going to stay pretty constantly in the same position. And then also we're going to have different animations based on whatever we are holding. Maybe we are carrying something, maybe we have a weapon, like in this case you can see he's holding like an assault rifle, maybe a pistol, maybe whatever, and we're going to cover those topics as well. But for this episode, that is going to be it. We have some basic blend space set up, ready to go. And also I believe these values right here should be replicated as well, because that is the default character movement, and the default character movement is replicated. As you can see, he's running around, and also the jumping is fully replicated, because those are the default things that are just replicated by default inside Unreal Engine 4. So yeah, that's going to be it for today's episode. If you learned something new and think this is helpful, and if you want to learn more, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I see you in the next episode.